UFOs, ETs, close encounters, alien tech. These are topics that most people are cautious to broach, especially in academic or professional circles. But in our integral community, where a lot of people are also cautious, a few prominent voices have come out and invited us to take up this conversation. Stuart Davis started blogging on the topic not long ago and reported on his own highly strange and anomalous otherworldly encounters back in 2018. On a recent Integral Life's Ken show, Corey DeVos coaxed Wilbur to comment for the first time at length on this topic. And earlier this year, Sean Esbjorn Hargens launched a new intensive course on exo-studies, inviting us to be galactic and give the UFO phenomenon its integral due. In my own life, I've not been an avid follower of UFO literature, but the existence and nature of extraterrestrial life forms has been a lifelong point of curiosity for me. And the UFO phenomenon has dogged me even when I haven't pursued it. I've had several anomalous UFO-related experiences myself. I was hired in the 90s to contribute to the disclosure project of Dr. Stephen Greer. And thanks to some generous connections made by a friend, I'm also listed as an executive producer on one of Dr. Greer's documentaries, Sirius. Whether or not there's anything actually extraterrestrial or otherworldly behind so-called close encounter events, the persistent, global, and rather singular nature of these experiences make them worthy of anthropological interest. I think that should be our minimal baseline position. I currently remain agnostic about many of the claims made about UFOs and ETs, but I've never felt a need to hide my interest in the topic or be ashamed of taking the experiences of so many reputable people seriously, at least seriously enough to give them a respectful listening and careful inquiry. While some would argue it's a risky venture socially to give any credence to this whole domain at all, I think it's in our best interest to normalize it, to give it daylight attention to the extent that we're able. So I applaud the recent broaching of this topic in our community, not in spite of the high strangeness and social risk, but because of it. It's an edge where we probably have something of significance to learn about ourselves, if not about the world. But if we're going to normalize it and open it up for integral consideration, then of course we will need to look at it from more perspectives than the anthropological. It's certainly an anthropological curiosity, but an integral post-metaphysical approach would invite us to hold a broader transdisciplinary vision. It would invite us to invoke the acategorical imperative, the willingness to hold our ontologies in suspension and to follow multiple lines of flight at once, and to take up a robust, integral methodological pluralist course of study. Not only the 4 quadrants, but the 8 zones. What have we learned? And what more is available to uncover empirically, phenomenologically, developmentally, cross-culturally, and historically? What are the political dimensions and implications of this phenomenon? Or the philosophical, religious, or cosmological? Personally, I feel this suite of phenomena is strange and slippery enough that it is likely to confound the neat boundaries of a 4-quadrant or 8-zone schema. But I think that is where we should start, with a grounded transdisciplinics, and then see where that takes us. In the near future, the Integral Stage will be presenting a Wheel of Perspectives panel discussion on UFOs and exo-studies. My friend Layman Pascal and I are assembling a group of speakers, and we'll be excited to debut the video in the next several weeks. In the meantime, I've invited Layman to offer some framing questions to help set the stage, so to speak, for the inquiry to come.
Hello, everybody. What we want to do here is open and hold a space for an ongoing dialogue around that set of topics that might broadly be called integral ufology or exo-studies or embodied cosmocentrism or the whatnot. We're talking UFOs, UAVs, AAVs, UAPs, aliens, angels, elves, ghosts, and gods. Bruce and I are inviting interlocutors who we think combine a serious interest in these phenomenon with a nuanced, high-level, multi-perspectival sensibility. You know, I've been fascinated by these things all my life. I've spent considerable time weighing the most fantastical trans-rational perspectives against my own history of strange encounters. I've never been in the closet about it, and I don't think it's ever blown my mind. These can and should be normal topics. But this whole thing isn't about what I've experienced or what I've concluded. It's an invitation to you guys, to anyone who can come into this discussion in depth, regardless of which facet of the phenomenon you're most concerned about. Are you interested in nuts and bolts disclosure of solid craft bodies, technology, and secret groups, what they have or don't have? Are you interested in the possibility of non-standard energies or entities that may have inhabited the biosphere or atmosphere of our planet throughout history? Are you interested in the spiritual and cultural power of the figure of the alien other and its capacity to help humanity grow past ethnic and national divisions into a planetary and interplanetary civilization? Maybe you're interested in how much of this phenomenon can be explained away by standard modern science, or maybe you're interested specifically in how this phenomenon challenges the underlying assumptions of modern science. You could be intrigued by the probabilities of the Fermi paradox or by the praying mantises of the synchronicity dimension. There's an enormous array of possible perspectives that can be integrated together on this subject. We're all blind men groping different parts of an elephant. And my wager is that our collective intelligence can do a much better job figuring out this puzzle than even the smartest person among us. That said, we aren't solely concerned with figuring out the one truth about this puzzle. We're all pretty much aware we have to figure out how to work deeply and personally with the ontological ambiguity of these entities. They not only tend to blur the ordinary lines between subjective, objective, and intersubjective experience, but at some point, most investigators seem to conclude that these things can't really be understood with our conventional way of deploying ordinary categories of thought. There's something about this whole thing that takes us into the intercategorial fuzziness at the edge of reality. And yet we also have to be cautious about exaggerating the significance of ontological ambiguity. We have to be daring and open, yes, of course, but we also have to be responsible with our tools of thought. It's easy to read a little Philip K. Dick or Terence McKenna and start falling in love with the mysticism of the weird. Even though I get hard for that stuff, it doesn't mean it's the essential solution to these things. There may be real and definite natural science answers to some of this stuff, and collectively we may continue to need things like locality, substantiality, unidirectional time, and the subject-object divide, even just in order to act successfully as parts of the multidimensional incompleteness of the cosmos. It's not simple. We can't just say on the one hand that we have to evaluate accounts of advanced aerospace vehicles with non-reactive propulsion fields, and on the other hand, explore mythopoetic encounters with psychic archetypal intelligences. You can't go very far in either direction without the need to pass back across the ontological gap and switch to some other epistemology. Even very solid-minded Air Force observers who think they saw actual material technology very often have to describe it as working like magic or operating indifferently to everything we think as the basic rules of the material universe. There's a deep entanglement here between these sides that require us to embrace some interior realities, some exterior realities, and something that isn't quite either of those things. So on the one hand, we need to cultivate a set of skills for inhabiting the ontologically peculiar environment that these phenomena call us forward to. But on the other hand, we need to keep working diligently to try to really solve whatever can be solved. And altogether, that's a crucible or engine that powers this shared inquiry. So let me tell you the questions that make me feel most intrigued. I want to know whether the physical universe can explain this, or whether we need to invoke something like a subtle realm operating by its own laws. I want to know which explanations are actually coherent with science now and going forward. If we want to speculate about ghosts or time travelers or communication from ourselves in the future, those are only options if the laws of the reality we exist in do not forbid those things. And we can't simply be open to every evocative idea without also being open to the possibility that some things are impossible and are foreclosed to every perspective. But which ones? So I want to know also what these phenomenon are. I want to know if these phenomena can be explained by a lower intelligence rather than a higher intelligence. We know complex and perplexing patterns emerge from very simple elements of the universe. Could most of the UFO phenomenon be explained by entities with a lower consciousness than ours? I want to know if it makes more sense to think of ancient encounters with luminous orbs and animal spirits as examples of futuristic aliens viewed through the developmental stage lens of a primitive mind, or whether the animal spirits are being misperceived by us now through a technological lens. How do the archaic and the futuristic come together on this? Are these really visitors in mind or body from galactic civilizations, or are they aspects of the biosphere of this planet that have been hiding in plain sight all along? perceived by accident or rendered visible temporarily by shifting around DMT molecules in our brain's perception mechanism. And I want to know if these things, whatever they are succeeding. If they have a shared motive or many different conflicting motives, if they want to communicate, if they want to change us somehow, then is it working? Is it failing? Is some of it working and some of it failing? These are questions I don't really hear being asked. I want to know if these things are best understood by foregrounding them in the conscious mind, or whether there's something about them that's best handled in shamanic trance in the intelligence of the unconscious. I want to know if the image of the UFO can and should play a role in the future religion of a multi-stage evolving humanity. And I want to know who's done the best so far in dealing with them. Who's been the smartest and most successful about this? The US government, medieval secret societies, ancient shamans, UFO cultists, Graham Hancock's ancient proto-civilization, Whitley Strieber's private communion experiences. Where and when and how have we dealt with this better or worse? And what would better or worse even mean on topics like these? So that's just a partial list of what turns me on about this topic. But I want to know what you want to know. I think if deep and nuanced people bring their questions together with respect and good humor and openness to both intuitive and counterintuitive ideas, that we can collectively start to present some wisdom about this stuff. That's what I'm hoping for with this project.
Thank you, Layman. I look forward to seeing what we can generate collectively through our panel and follow-up discussions, depending on how far we want to take this. Stay tuned. Kirk out.